How's it going, Ev?
Good, buddy. How about yourself?
Not bad, not bad.
Fantastic.
So, welcome to episode 6, I think it is now. So I kind of came up with a title for this one before we even started, and it's called Procrastinate Much.
Why is that?
Because it seems like we've had a hard time getting around to record this. We had the first 5 kind of coming out at a steady pace, and then there was kind of a drop-off. And, for whatever reasons. And it kind of reminded me of basically something I think is very useful to talk about, and that is for someone who is a so-called spiritual seeker or meditator, or just trying to really take on any task that is going to increase the quality of your life from the inside out. There's a procrastination factor, right, that creeps up with most people, I think.
Yeah.
In one form or another. So I think it's really good to discuss that, because it can be what people use as a source of discouragement. Right? So I'm procrastinated, and I procrastinated so long that it's no longer worth doing anymore. In that line of thinking. So, I know myself, I've experienced that. Times where, I've been meditating, regularly, doing all the practices and whatever it is I was doing for months on end. And then I would stop for about 2 days, and the 2 days would stretch into 3. And then I would go once, and then I would start to lose my rhythm. And then it'd be like, then there'd be like 3 days on, then 3 days off. And then a week would creep up, and then all of a sudden I'd realize a week and a bit more had gone by. And then I'm like, now I got to start all over again. And then from starting all over again, I went out and I found another practice, and then had to build up to that, you know what I mean? And then to start up all again. And I found myself doing another type of meditation. Like, this is the one, I'm going to stick with this one. Right? And, that's the ups and downs.
Totally. That's it.
That you go through. Yeah. And it's normal. It's normal. Like, unless you have, sent yourself to a monastery somewhere, right, where you have no choice. When you're trying to do this, living an everyday life, so to speak, there's lots of choice. So, it's no less valid than going to a monastery. And here's why. If you go to a monastery or any kind of a spiritual environment where that's all that there is to do, then that's all there is to do. And so you've removed the choice, right? And that's one way of going about it. And it's tough, because you'll probably be freaking out the first couple of months. A lot of people go to monasteries and, take off in the middle of the night saying, screw this, I can't do it anymore. But when you decide to do it from the situation of just an everyday life, you build a different type of strength. Not the strength of, okay, I'm going to sit here in the monastery and not go anywhere and deal with it. You build up a strength where I'm going to choose to do this now over the other things that I have a choice to do.
Yes.
And so there's 2 different ways of going about it, right? So it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of it like resistance training, where, okay, I can go and I can focus on pushing the weight, or there's that part of the weight when the weight's coming back towards you, to slow that, slow the weight coming back towards you. Suppose you're doing a bench press. To push it up requires something, but don't just let the weight fall back down. Let it come slowly and resist it on the way down. And they both build a certain type of strength, right? And it's the same way. So to choose it and to build up a steady discipline or practice within your life, where you've chosen to set aside this time, and then you choose to go deeper and deeper into it. So you're not just in a regular meditation practice, you're also in a regular mindfulness practice as you go through the day. And then you could take it to the next step further, where you're going out of your way to try and do good things in your community, or be a good friend to people better than you were before. it grows and it grows and it grows, right? So, yeah, it's a different type of thing. It's like trying to, I can use this metaphor for many things, but saying, okay, suppose you're a plant and you're on a farm, right? That's all there is, right? You're going to grow, you're going to get, everything is set up, right? But everything's in straight lines and it's very disciplined. Or are you a plant growing in the garden? That takes a different type of thing because you have to remember it, right? You have to take care of it. It's your own, right? And there's just you. So, yeah, I just wanted to pass that on to people. Don't get disheartened. Don't use your procrastination as a reason to stop doing what you're doing or to give up, right? It's natural, and everyone's going through it with you, so to speak, right? I always think of that too, that there's probably someone else out there going through the same thing, right? And there are probably some people out there that have gone through the same thing and passed beyond this point. So you're not going through it alone, and it's a natural part of the process. So don't be discouraged, right? And just choose to choose again, right? Because that's what time is for. Every second you have is an opportunity to choose again, right? And no matter what you chose before, the next second is the opportunity to choose again and choose again. So, yeah, just wanted to kind of throw that into the podcast today as a starting point.
Yeah, so I guess it's just all down to the skill of discipline. And this is something that I've sort of come into more recently, because, for years I meditated, but I might meditate consistently for like a few months and then just fall off completely for a few months and then come back and then back and forth and back and forth. But it's the same for, anything in your life. I happen to run my own business, and I've felt that through the business, I've gained great discipline because, of course, my family requires me to generate an income. And if I'm not disciplined in my business, then I won't be able to achieve, I guess, this sort of normal sort of life, right? And so that's sort of translated into my spiritual practice and my meditations. And because I have such a busy life with my family and my business, I've got to find time to meditate. And that's really important for me. And in order to find the time to meditate, I have to get up really early in the morning. I may have mentioned this earlier in one of our other podcasts. So I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 before my family's up so that I have at least an hour where I can sit by myself and allow myself to sink into that place of the unmanifest. And even that's a major challenge. Like, it takes a lot of discipline when the alarm goes off and, you're super tired. You've had a long day the previous day and you have a big day ahead of you. And the mind immediately comes in and says, maybe not today. Just sleep in a bit more today. You know what I mean? It's really, really hard. But what I do with that I'll just sit for a few minutes. The mind will just go off for a while saying, no, you'll be sweet. Just do it tomorrow. But then I'll just get up. Right. And as soon as I get up, it's all good. It's like going to the gym. You know what I mean? It's like, man, I don't feel like going to the gym today. But once you go and you do it and you smash it, you're so glad you did. And it's the same with the meditation. So it really is developing that skill of discipline. And it may take ages. It does take ages, right? Because you're essentially developing a new pattern in your life, right? That's in opposition to the other patterns that you've developed over the countless years. So if you're dedicated to finding peace in your life or happiness in your life or liberation, it does take a certain amount of discipline to move towards that. So continue to develop the skill of discipline, and it will have massive implications in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was talking to a friend about this too, who had a certain thing he was trying to, stop doing, right? And I kind of pointed out to him, and I wanted to pass this along, is that, you have the discipline. It's just that you're disciplined towards something else and not this.
Yes.
So, the alcoholic who gets up every day, and right in the morning, he's like, I got to have a drink. And then he's like, okay. But, I got other things to do, but he's like, you got to have a drink. So he'll go and he'll have his drink, and then he'll do everything else. And then it'll come up again. Okay, we have to have a drink, right? And it'll keep coming back to it. And then he's like, okay, now we got to get drunk, or whatever it is, right? Or the person who overeats, they wake up in the morning and they're like, you know what? I want something sweet, right? Let's get that insulin level really spiked, right? And then now we're moving on to, you know what? I need that extra bite, right? Or I won't stop until I feel like I can't move, or whatever it is, right? It's anything, right? Another friend of mine was dealing with his porn addiction, right? And I'm saying, so it creeps up on you. Or you're not, you might wake up and say, I can skip today, but no matter what, you'll go back to it, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that people deal with, right, in everyday life that we call vices or addictions. But I just want to point out that all your addictions is that discipline that you already have being held hostage by something that's not constructive in your life. And so if you can find a way to set it free from that thing, you'll find you have vast reserves of discipline already there, of willpower already there. It's just that it's in service to something else right now. Because if you look at it, I say my Muslim brothers and sisters pray 5 times a day, right? And they try to find, and my Buddhist friends try to keep their minds on the practice, being mindful. I say an alcoholic has that same dedication and discipline just to the drink, right? So it's there. You just got to find out where it is, and then kind of like take it back from whatever it is that's taking it from you. So in a sense, nothing can be created or destroyed. It just takes a different form. And the same thing goes with your discipline. And it's not always for things that are negative. You might have something else you enjoy to do that's like healthy, right? Like I love to jog, or I love to go to the gym, or whatever like that. That also requires a certain level of discipline. It's just that you've taken it now and done something relatively constructive with it. And so you can now call upon the discipline you've developed through doing these constructive things, and now bring it towards your spiritual discipline. So whether it's being used destructively or constructively, it's somewhere there in your life. You just got to find out what it is that I'm the habit of always repeating and doing without fail, right? And something we all have an addiction to, you could say, is indulging our thoughts. So think about how diligently you indulge your thoughts. Now, what if you could take that diligence and put it towards now not identifying with thoughts, right? So the energy is there. You just got to find a way to use it for something else, to change what's being done with it, right? And I find meditation for me is I call it like a roll call, right? Where I go inside myself and I do a roll call of my energies, right? And that's what kind of going over what you did in the day is like. Like say, okay, how was I today, right? Was I mindful? Was I present? Was I, was I operating within the ideals that I've put up for myself as a way to discipline myself? And you do a roll call and you see, where did your energy kind of leak out towards something else in the day? And I say, okay, it was there and there and there. And I get, okay, I want to call all that energy back now. I want to call it all back to me. And, patch any leaks and say, okay, now tomorrow or the next moment, I'm going to do better, right? And I don't know if it's subconscious or something, but it's like your mind will find a way to alarm you to when the energy is leaking out in that way going forward. And it might take a few days to kick in, but your mind is very malleable and it's trainable. So if you have a goal in mind that you're really invested in, you just have to train your mind, because it's been trained to do whatever you're doing, whether it happened innocently or you did it consciously. You can do it with this too, so that you'll feel a resistance. Suppose you want to just not gossip all the time, right? And you say, I don't want to gossip. I don't want to gossip. And maybe after a week or so of doing the roll call, bringing all your energy in and saying, I could have done better than I did today, but I forgive myself. And now moving forward, I have another chance, which is the only way you could ever even, I don't know, like if you want some kind of redemption, then that's the way to do it, because you can't change the past. But you do have a say in the future. So when you do that, the next time you want to say gossip or something like that, you'll feel something going, maybe I shouldn't do this. I don't want to do this. I feel, you feel the energy leak out. You say, I'm not comfortable with this. Something will go off inside yourself. And you might still go ahead and do it, but you won't feel as unconscious as when you did it before. So before you might not even have thought about it and you just did it. And then once it's done, it's like you woke up from a hypnosis, and all of a sudden, why did I do that? Or man, and there it went. This time, while you're doing it, you'll feel a resistance, because your mind that you've been telling, I don't want to do this, will say to you, you said you don't want to do this, and you're going to do it now. And in that way, your mind can be a friend at some parts of this process, so to speak. So it's like you're training your mind to be mindful of the ideals that you're trying to instill in it. So it's like you're trying to train an unruly pet. But it will, it'll come, and it'll fall into line. It just takes your introspection. So go to the command function level of your own mind, right? Which is you. It really is you. It's not the other way around. Go to the command function level, if you want to use these type of terms, and code yourself. Do your own coding. Do your own programming, right? Don't just follow along with the programming. That's, you kind of, I say when you kind of, your first spiritual awakening in some sense is kind of awakening to the fact that your mind is just running and you're following it. And then understanding that, wait a minute, like I'm not that program running. I'm me, and the mind is running and running and running, and I've been following it, identifying with it, indulging it as if it is me. But thinking is something I do. It's not what I am. And so meditation can be a time when you go into the command function level of this programming and say, okay, I can't stop these programs from running, right? I haven't been able to still my mind, but what I can do is encourage it to do things that help to bring it towards the goal of my stillness. So I'm going to start to be more mindful and watch it, because I find it works slower. It doesn't take me up in its current and wash me away when I'm being more mindful. It's kind of like all of a sudden you were floating down a river, getting bumped on rocks and stuff through a bunch of rapids. And then meditation is the first time where you start to build a piece of driftwood, right? And you hang on to it. So it's better than it was before, even though you're being washed along. And eventually you catch another piece of driftwood and maybe a vine somewhere, and you start to build a raft, right? So all of a sudden you're still going down the river, but now you've got a raft to stabilize yourself on. So you're not, hitting rocks. You can guide yourself. Whoa, there's a long stick. All right, now I can use a pole to kind of guide me as I'm moving down the river. And meditation is kind of going back in yourself and finding these pieces of driftwood, or going deep within yourself and going to the command function, the real coding of all these programs that are running, and saying, I want to run a different program. I want to run the program that helps move me towards greater and greater levels of stillness and discipline. And unless you go inside to the level of that command function, then you're not going to have access to it. So it's like you got to work on it from the inside out, not from the outside in. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So basically, you'll see that most spiritual practices are designed to restructure the mind in a way that it promotes a positive growth towards stillness. Yeah? And something like CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, is another technique that's used, which is basically just reprogramming those patterns in your brain to a more constructive way of thinking. Yeah. And a lot of people may get sort of down or feel guilty by the fact that, you know, they're trying really hard, but they keep falling back into sort of these unconscious patterns. But just remember that that's how the mind is structured. So the human mind is basically, you know, a mass of neurons, and those neurons form links with each other. And the more that pattern is played out, the more long-term and solidified those links become. So of course, the most prominent patterns in your life are the longest ones, right? So which is why the biggest impressions on the human psyche come from childhood, right? Because those are your longest impressions. And so it's basically any sort of spiritual practice, or it could be a therapy practice, is to break down those old, long-standing bonds in your brain network and opening it up to new ones. Yeah, it's called neuroplasticity. And this is just another way of looking at it, right? So if you can take the time, step back and see what's happening, you have the opportunity to consciously create the patterns that you want, right? And it takes time, right? And you will fall back into unconscious patterns, but just keep it up. And that's where discipline comes in.
Yeah, and while you were saying that, I was kind of just thinking, like, you know, of these things that are like in childhood. And to this day, right, something inside me rises in joy, actually, every time I see a Toys R Us sign. Right? I don't know what it is. Well, I know what it is, right? But like I literally, if I'm driving or whatever like that, and I see like a Toys R Us, and I don't even have to like be able to read it, I just know the shape of it, right? Or if I see the giraffe, whatever, something inside me just goes, you know, even though I don't play with toys anymore, right? But, you know, I don't know if they got me too young, you know, the song, you know, da 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 da, right? You know, but yeah, that's what it is, right? And some of them are funny, right? Like we're talking very seriously when we're doing this, but the process should be something that, you know, you discipline and you're serious about in this discipline of it. But in what you see and the whole process of it, you should take some joy in it, because you're doing something good for yourself, right? And sometimes some stuff will just be, you know, small little, like, I don't need to sit down and meditate to tell myself, stop getting excited when you pass a Toys R Us sign, right? Like that's not what I, you know, like I don't need to unprogram that. I don't mind that running, right? If that's a program, right? I don't mind it, right? It's just that, you know, if I have kids, I'll be wary of that, saying, well, you know, because I guess sometimes it's indicative of something else. Like I want new toys. I want to, you know, but that whole thing of Toys R Us was like, there's a sense of mysticism there. I'm going to go there and I'm going to see some toys I've never seen before. And I'll be able to use my imagination to say, if I had all these toys, right? And so it builds up a desire within me, right? And then now, having unpacked that, I say, oh, okay. So there's something in me that came when I was really young that says more and more and more, right? And so by not going, I'm going to condemn that, by unpacking it on the command structure, letting it play itself out, and then what, and then what, and then what? Okay, now I have something I can work on. Now, where is that? Where is the Toys R Us sign, right? That's happening in my life right now, right? And it could be, like I was saying before, when the alcoholic sees a bottle of whiskey. Oh, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Or the drug addict, see some drugs, da-da-da-da-da, right? And they're off to Toys R Us again, so to speak, right? And you can see how, like I was saying before, it's the same pattern, just acting itself out using a different form, right? And so I kind of started speaking when I said this. I was like, Toys R Us is harmless, but if I unpack it, that's the pattern. It came when I was young, but since I don't play with toys anymore, it's found other things to kind of latch onto, right? It's found other, you'd say, variables to put into that set equation of the programming. Yeah, that's what I mean. So what just happened now was I took something as simple as Toys R Us, I unpacked it, I looked at it, I saw it was happening, and now I see, oh, wow, this pattern is happening in other parts of my life, but it seems so innocent, right? And so I've just talked myself in a circle, so to speak, but just as we're sitting here talking, I've unpacked something that I didn't intend to, but here we are. And that's why I like this way of, I don't know, as far as a podcast goes, I like this because it's honest, right? I'm not saying something that's been rehearsed or something that's been like really articulated and thought of before. Like, we can do that, right? But that's what I wanted to say is that, that's what just happened now is something very, I think, normal and relatable, right? If we look at small things in our life and we just take the time to sit with it and unpack it and then look at how it expressed itself in different ways. So one of the tricks, you could say, that the mind plays or illusion plays is that it'll do the same thing, but it'll just change the angle it's doing it from. Or it'll change the characters in the play, but it'll act out the same drama, right? And so people kind of go through the life thinking things are changing, but actually it's the same patterns being played out over and over and over again. You're just changing the characters in the drama. You're just changing the variables in the equation. You're just changing the let's say the set or the setting in which it happens. But it's the same mental patterns. You're doing the same things over and over again. And so if you can learn to kind of look at your life in that way and see the skeletal structure of your mental patterns as opposed to dealing with the meat of it, because the meat can always change on the bones, but the bones stay the same type thing once they get set, then you'll start to see, okay, you might be able to help yourself out more because you might try to be fixing this one thing, but actually it's not touching the skeleton at all, right? You're just changing the meat, saying, okay, I'm not going to be whatever. I'll stop being addicted to this, but then it just gets replaced with another addiction, right? So when you start to replace these things in your life with mindfulness and meditation, it's not giving one addiction up for another one. It's taking the energy in the addiction and bringing it back so you can, be with it and carry it, right? And so that when the mind comes to talk to you about doing it, you're not going to give energy to that thought pattern and then play it out and then find yourself stuck back where you were, feeling depleted again because you did something that was, not constructive at the end of the day. You can kind of keep that energy for yourself and hold it. And you'll feel the mind tugging at it because it's used to feeding off of that energy. The pattern is used to feeding off of that energy within you, saying, I want that drink, or I've got to watch the porn, or I've got to take that extra bite of the sweet thing, you'll feel the pull. Like it's like let's not talk about like the whole technical aspect of it. If you had your eyes closed and you just had to feel what it felt like when that happens, it feels like something's tugging on you to go and do that, right? And so it's energy kind of like that wants to be pulled away from you. And what your goal could possibly be is to hold that energy and don't let any of it get pulled away from you. In order to do so, you've got to be in the control station that lets the energy flow in and out. And you've got to first take control of that station and say, no energy flows out unless I say so. And this is kind of like another way of just describing mindfulness, right?
It's interesting because I actually went and saw Russell Brand last night, and his show is amazing. I absolutely love him. And he's basically, his new show is around addiction in the 12 steps, right? Which is another spiritual process, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? And so he just outlined like exactly what you said there, sort of patterns that continue to play out at certain times. And although he may have moved on from a specific pattern, so let's say that his drug addiction moved on to addiction into pornography, and then his addiction, he moved on from that to an addiction to trying to take down the establishment, right? And now he's running a new pattern, which is the pattern of spirituality. And he himself says, like, I don't know if this is still the same thing, right? Right? If it's just me continuing that same pattern of, look at me, And what I love about him is he does it in a, of course, in a very funny way, right? And looks at life in this sort of, jovial way, despite the amount of suffering that he's been through, what I mean? And you can still see, like, as he's on stage, the sort of idiosyncrasies that he has still, you know what I mean? The patterns that are still playing out in him. But because he has delved into it and taken the time to discipline himself into wanting to know, into the introspection, he's made massive gains in his life towards a positive, let's say, right? And I guess that's what we all want to do, is we want to have a better life in some sort of way. We want happiness, right? And so all these techniques that we're talking about is basically trying to replace suffering with happiness, right? So essentially we're creating a new pattern of love and peace and selflessness and compassion, right? So we're trying to change these things in us, and it takes time, right? But if you make a concerted effort to do it, it doesn't take long, really. It doesn't take very long in the grand scheme of things. And we've talked about it before in previous podcasts about this sort of this move to higher states of consciousness, right? So that's basically what we're talking about. But for me, essentially, remember that what we ultimately want to talk about in this show, well, I do anyway, is complete liberation from all of that. Yeah. So despite the fact that you are moving higher in this physical realm, right, which is fantastic and it's great for you and the people around you, ultimately, for me, it's about liberation from all of those things, right? To finally come to a place by using those processes where it doesn't ultimately matter what stage of that process you're in, right? That you know exactly what you are and from what place that is, right? And that's the place of all knowing, right? Where all of this is taking place in, right? And from that place, there's peace and love and joy. And it's always like that. Always. No matter what stage of the spiritual path you're on. And if you're looking for that true peace, right? You need to find that space within you that all things happen, all things can be as they are. And I found that, as we spoke about previously, that when you do find that these tendencies, like discipline, naturally flow from the human being, and the human wants to become happier, wants to be better, wants to make the world a better place naturally, right? So there's two ways that you can go about it, really. You can go from the top down or the bottom up, right? So you can take a path of love and devotion, and that will still get you to this place of unity and unlimitlessness. Or you can find that which you are and allow that to express from you, right? Naturally. That's what I found anyway.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I understand what you are expressing. On this kind of podcast too, that's I find that people who have done that, right, they don't really need to listen to what I'm saying. Those people are, yeah, they might listen to get nuggets here and there or to reinforce it, but they don't really need to listen to what I'm saying. So I'm coming from a place of service from to the average person, to the person who is just, and that's just my approach to it, right? I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying at all, actually. I just want to make myself useful, so to speak, to, let's say, a broader audience of people. And so I'm no expert on Kabbalah, but the general idea behind it is that you're going to put yourself under a strict discipline, under a real spiritual discipline, and go within yourself and do all these practices and things like that. And I think this is actually the point behind most religions, is that you're going to, make yourself better, do things that are constructive, devote yourself to love, right? And do all these things. And you're going to try and be the best, most selfless person you can be, and not give up on it, and just keep going at it, right? And then there's a certain point where you're going to realize that it's impossible. It's impossible. You can't do it.
Yeah.
And at that point, when you realize it's impossible, there is a true cry from within your heart to say, I don't know what to do. And you could say that that's what God, or the Absolute, was waiting for. And that's when it will enter and answer your cry. And when you hear something come back, that's when you understand at a much deeper level that there's something more going on. And now that thing comes in on your behalf, and you start to naturally fall into that. But for someone that's starting way on the outside, say like I'm a person on death row, how do I get there, right? How do I get there? And so that's what religions are set up to. They set up these impossible standards. And when you try to do it from the outside, it's one thing, because you're like, man, this is tough. But when you actually try to apply those principles on the inside, on the level of your own mind, so that I'm going to be the example inside myself in thought, then you truly understand the difficulty behind it. But it's important that one makes that attempt with everything. You could say, if you want to say, Jesus' first commandment was love God with all your mind, body, heart, and soul. So do it. Do it. Give yourself over to it and try. Don't worry about failing. Get up again and try and try and try. right? And you don't know it, but you're doing something, not on a level maybe you're aware of yet. And you'll reach a point where you realize there's nothing you can do. And Osho is quoted as saying, the Buddha gained enlightenment on the evening where he realized there was nothing he could do. But if you don't bring yourself to that point, there's always going to be something inside you that says there's something I can do. So you kind of got to get that out of you first. And then once you realize that, there's a surrender that happens. And in that surrender, you end up in the same place as you were describing. And so that's the angle I want to articulate, right? Because I that's more about how I come to it. Although I do understand the, you could say, Advaita point of view.
Yes.
Right? I understand that point of view. And actually, at some points I would use it just to kind of chill out along the way. Right? But I wanted to articulate the other way of doing it through a spiritual or religious practice, through a certain discipline, because that's the way most people are going to have to go about it. Even Ramana was saying some people don't have the karma to actually use Advaita. Right? So the fact that, you and I or whatever, people can sit down and use Advaita and then know the self and then go from there, right? That's one thing, to have an experience of it, but to actually stay in connection with this thing throughout the whole day, throughout the entirety of your experience and never lose it for a second, so that the mind never takes you on a trip, that's also another thing. And then to have the experience and that be the final experience and you just bang and I got it, the sudden awakening where you just whoop and I'm out of it and I'm liberated, right? Every religious and every spiritual teacher will say, not everyone has the karma for that, whatever karma is, right? So there might be some other things you need to work out before you can kind of put everything down. To put it in simpler terms, right? Like I can't drive past a Toys R Us sign and even have it be like a fond memory of, I remember when I was excited by that, right? The Toys R Us sign has to be the same as the manure store sign when you drive by it. And both of them are extracting the same reaction, right? And there's nothing I can do about that as the mind. It can't. So all I can do is surrender and say, it's in the hands of the Absolute, or it's in the hands of God, or Inshallah, as they would say. Not my will, but thy will be done. So I'm not capable of doing this, so I leave it in your hands. And the awareness of the thing in which hands you leave it is the same as the awareness that one gains through the Advaita. Because even though it may sound as if it's me and God and not me being God or God is one with me and all that stuff, the thing you surrender to is within yourself. And it's the understanding of that brings you to the same place that you were describing.
For me, it was definitely the sort of direct path, the Advaita path, that brought me to this clarity rather than sort of a strict adherence to some sort of religious path. Yeah. So it's more of, instead of doing things to get there, you look inward and you see the functioning of the human being and what that is, right? So earlier I was talking about cognitive behavioral therapy and neuroplasticity, all right, as these being functions of the mind, right? So the more that you are introspective and attentive to what's arising within your psyche, right, the more you can shed and know that which you're not. Yeah. So for those of you out there who have more of an analytical mindset, this approach may be more suited to you, right? Where you're actually looking and analyzing the faculties of consciousness, right? And by faculties, I mean things like attention. Well, what is attention? Or will. What exactly is will? Yeah. Or consciousness. What's that? Right? So looking inward and seeing what are these things. And it's easy enough to sort of look at the body and say, okay, well, I'm not this because it's changed considerably since I was born and is constantly in flux, right? So that's changed, but I'm still here. Well, what is it that I am, right? Okay. Well, let's look at the mind, right? Oh, the mind's crazy. It's at one point you believe in one thing, at the next point you believe in another. At one point something looks like the greatest thing to do, and when you do it, you deeply regret it, right? So that's always changing too, right? And then you look at, all right, well, what constitutes my experience? And your experience is basically whatever your attention lies on. Right. So if you focus your attention on negative thoughts, right, well, then your entire experience is negative. If you focus your attention on positive thoughts, then you have a more positive outlook on life. Right? And then sometimes you'll notice that, well, my attention is fully in what I'm doing right now. And that's a sense of pure presence, right? And then sometimes you notice that, oh, my attention just went off there. It was just, my thoughts took it away, right? Took my attention away, right? And that's the experience of unconsciousness. And then it's like, well, okay, if my attention can change so much, am I attention? Well, no, right? Because I'm even aware of that changing in attention, right? So let's go back even deeper, right? Right. So once you're aware of these changing in attention, and you can focus more attention onto positive things, let's say, right? Well, what is it that is essentially driving that movement into more positive way of thinking? And that's a sense of will. And so it's will that's moving that. But also, I look at will as a faculty, and that also is in flux. Sometimes there's a strong sense of will, sometimes there's no sense of will, right? Like, okay, well, let's look back even further, right? What is it that's noticing all of these? What is that in which all of these things are arising? Even when you're in deep sleep, you notice deep sleep. When you're dreaming, you notice dreaming. When you're in the waking state, you notice waking, right? You perceive all your senses, You perceive thoughts, emotions, all these things. What is that in which all of those are perceived? And sit with that. And look at it. What qualities does it have? Does it have quality? But it's there. It's always there. That's what you truly are. That's the only constant in everything. And for those of you who can experience and embody that and see that The entire universe is taking place. Time is taking place within this timeless nothingness. You will know what you truly are. And from that place, you, the human being, will continue to play out its fate, destiny, karma, whatever it is. And from there, you'll feel true compassion, love, and selflessness for all that's arising, even yourself. And I guess that's basically the opposite point of what K-Man was talking about.
So to be of service, I would say, now what about, it's cool to be able to sit there and do this, right? And even, it's almost a form of, because you were talking for a long time, it's a form of like self-unhypnosis, so to speak, right?
Yes.
But we'll get up from here and then hypnosis kicks back in. And then I got to run back to my meditation to get to that place again. I got to go through all my hoops, go through all my steps, you know what I mean? Just like a person not trying to take a drink, right? They've got to go, okay, step 1, what did my sponsor say? Okay, and step 2. You talk yourself down off the ledge, so to speak. Now, how does one go about staying there?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really matter if you stay there or not, whether you remember yourself or not. You are that anyway. And you'll come back to it, right? And then you'll go away from it, and you'll come back to it, and you'll go away from it. But that's not the point. The point is to know that, yes? And then, from there, the human being becomes of service. You understand who you are in it. And so much of the negative thoughts and behaviors drop away. Because you just understand, well, I'm not that anymore. I'm not that. And it doesn't matter. I am eternal.
I understand. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But what I mean is that, so, and this is for, people that have looked at these things. If we take characters like the Buddha or Jesus or Ramana, these people who would say their connection to it is never broken. They are always in that. So they didn't say that, that's that and then nothing matters. They said, Jesus said, I am the Father, are one. Or Ramana would say, I am nothing but the self at all times, yes, right? Yeah. It's not something they said like, oh, and then, but I'm going to go and do this over here now. And then, but I'm still the self and do that. Is that their connection, their awareness of it was never broken. Right? So how does one go about attaining to that so that it's never broken? So it's not something I run back to, like Ramana would say, a fool having found the shade, right? Only a fool would walk back out into the sunlight. And then having felt the heat of the sun, then runs back to the shade. So he was speaking from a place where it's never, there is no going and coming back to it. No matter what happens, they're in a state in which it's unbroken. And so I understand everything you're saying, but what about the going and coming for those listening at home?
Yeah, so what I talk about the going and coming is basically unconsciousness and presence, which is what we're talking about in, well, most of the time anyway, right? So what we talk about of the process is basically the process of becoming more present and more mindful, right? That's it. Because what you are is always that. You are that always. It doesn't matter if you can't come and go from that. It's impossible. Yeah. So what we're talking about is, yes, a sense of presence. How do you stay more in that? And we've gone through it extensively. Is to train the mind to keep coming back to stillness, essentially.
And then once one realizes, though, right, that try as they might, right, they keep losing the presence, so to speak. This is the nitty gritty of it, right? They keep going and they come back and I found this. I found what I am. But then, oh, it's gone again. And there's this going and coming and going and coming and going and coming. Or, okay, I'm going to be more present. But then something might come along and boom, one loses their sense of self and goes unconscious again, right? That's the actual experience of the human being.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I propose that you're saying it doesn't matter because you're that all the time, but when you're unconscious, it matters, right?
Yeah.
So we want to find a place where it never matters all the time, right? How does one bridge that? And so what I would propose is we've come to the same place just from different things.
That's exactly it.
And now there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, totally.
So I still say there's nothing. So we've come to that point where, okay, I found my inner whatever and all that, or I've, tried to become a really religious person, right? Doesn't matter when I went there directly or I went there through, putting myself through some mental gymnastics. But I've come to this point now, okay, I know this and there's something there and then that's what I am now, or I've found, I know God is there, right? Whatever you want to call that, right? Because we're just saying words now. But feel the inner experience of what we're saying from both point of views.
Yes.
If you're listening. Okay? It's just words we're putting over top of something happening. But that's not it itself. So I would say now when you get to here, there's nothing you can do. All you can do is bring yourself back to it and develop your will to do so. But beyond that, there's nothing you can do. And that's the surrender. There's nothing you can say. There's nothing you can think. There's nothing. But that doesn't mean that because there's nothing you can do, you give up.
Yes.
Or you procrastinate.
Yeah.
There is nothing you can do except turn your intentions and will towards that. And see if you could say the dance partner appears. All you can do is hold out your hand. And this is what Michelangelo's painting is all about, where someone's reaching up and God is reaching down, right? You have to reach up. And that's all you can do. And after that, just let go. But doesn't mean you let your hand drop. And that's what I meant to be of service. Because that's the experience that we're going to go through, right? That you're going to go through all of that, the frustrations, the ups and downs. You might even be right there, right? But you're like, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Why can't I, right?
Yeah.
I've been so good for so long, all that, right? There's nothing you can do but raise your hand.
Yeah, I was speaking to my wife last night after we watched the Russell Brand show, and we were talking about this, and one of her friends who's gone through a lot, and it basically, we just came down to like, you have to take it if you want it. Like, you have to really want that, and move towards it. And then once you do, all the possibilities open up for you, right? And it unfolds. It's beautiful.
And that's the joy, right? You got to be, I don't know how to explain this, but like at some point, you're disciplining yourself and you're doing all that stuff. And then like, even if you're doing all that stuff and it's not a joy, there's something missing. You got to be happy to raise your hand. Right? like a little teacher's pet. Oh, I know. And if you've ever been a teacher and the teacher's pet always raised their hand, what do? After a while, you don't pick that student anymore because you know they got it. Okay. Okay. I know what you would. We've hit the hour.
I reckon that's real good.
Yeah. Let's not procrastinate before recording the next episode so long, eh?
Totally. We should have some time in the next few weeks. That'd be good. So this has been another podcast with Cayman and Ev and Oneness Radio. Stay tuned for some more spiritual action.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to come together.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Peace out.
Peace.